Hey guys, it's Cody Jones with Jangus Genetics LLC, and I've got a Christmas party tonight. That's why I've got my hair done up a little nicer. Don't have my hat with me. So one of the things that I've started doing, and the reason why I'm doing this, is last spring, no, sorry, 2 years ago. We've been in a bad drought the last 2 years, but 2 springs ago I came over. I thought I'd turned all the water off, all the mains off, and everything. But there's one pond that feeds two different water tanks here. I guess three different water tanks here at this rental farm. And I pulled the cows off for the winter. I had the main tanks, they shut off. The landlord shut them off and drained them, and kept the heaters on so we didn't tear anything up in there. And I thought I had everything turned off, and I came back that spring and I went to turn the cows out, and I was driving around checking out my next rotation, and I realized I drained a whole pond. Now this is not a very big pond, and actually we had a 3-inch, I was really worried about it, but we had a 3-inch rain. A week later it filled the pond all the way up, so we were really blessed in that situation. But I learned very quickly that just a single float breaking off, and with these tire tanks are great, but I don't know how old these are. I'm guessing some of them are pushing 15 years old, maybe a little more. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong on them. Whatever happened, if there was something that could go wrong with these tanks this year in this drought, it happened. We had a lot of heat, a lot of dryness, and a lot of cattle pressure. When we're dealing on small acreages here, so the cattle always have access to this water. It's not very far away, but they still want to come up in groups. They weren't really properly trained to come up and take turns like you'd think they ought to be. And even at the end of the summer, when you'd think that they would have it figured out, they would stand in the shade, and then when it was 100 degrees, they'd all come up and they'd be 70,000 pounds trying to drink off of a 300-gallon tank. And even with the pressurized water, sometimes we had some issues here. But the main things that have happened to me is on these older floats in these. I think the issues on my blue tanks isn't that they're wearing out, it's just that they don't produce enough water coming off of their siphon tanks. If they had pressure to them, it'd be better. But most of the tanks over here are they either pull out of the bottom of the pond, and if you have enough volume, that works pretty good. But other than that, there's 2 pump houses here, and then there's city water. And so all that's pressurized. And so pressure really isn't the issue for the most part until, like I said, it was 100 degrees and you had 70,000 pounds of cattle trying to drink out of it at the same time. That's going to stress any tank that's not just huge. I know out west they have some of those, but we don't have that here. I do like these tire tanks. They got about 300, and in a reasonable situation, you don't have any issues other than the parts wearing out. So it doesn't matter whether the cattle are drinking hard on them or whether one cow is just drinking out of it. Sometimes things just wear out. So I had to check these pretty much every day this summer because the 2 pump houses here were both pulling off of ponds, and both of those ponds were about to go dry. I actually had one tank I moved off of, and they'd been on it for 3 days. I moved off of it, and I was going to go back and shut it off. I waited another 2 days, and I noticed that pond was I could see the grass just start coming higher and higher. I'm like, oh no, what in the world? And after the cows had been pulled off, the tank failed. So what happens with these, in my experience over the last year, is my landlord's actually, he had a lot of these problems fixed already. So he switched from regular bolts to stainless bolts, and that solved 90% of the problems. Most of your problems is that the bolts are going to go and rust in too. But also, these bands will rust in too. I did have one where the rubber flapper was getting old, and so it wouldn't fill up, it wouldn't release. So once I figured that out and I pulled up on the rubber flapper, it went to working. But you got to check these every day. So what I've gone to doing is, my landlord here is just an awesome guy, and he's had a lot of experience with this, and so he put a cutoff at every single tank, and then at all of the base of the ponds, he put in cutoffs there that shut off everything. And that's an ingenious system. And I don't know if he used them every time, but I've been using them every time since I drained that pond, because it only takes, especially on those pumps, you could burn a pump out. You could drain a pond in just a few days here. And You know, yeah, I ought to be checking them every week or every month, but sometimes it just doesn't happen like that. And you could really drain a pond before you even get there and then burn up a $2,000 pump. So I just go ahead and I shut them off. And if you have to work on them, I think most of these, in the older ones, he had to end up working on them, and then when he had to work on them, he put in a cutoff there. So when I go to build mine, you know, I'm learning this process too. I'm going to put a cutoff at every water tank I ever build from now on, because it's just ingenious. Just, you know, it's a simple thing. It doesn't cost much while you're already there doing the dirt work, putting in the pipe. Put in a cutoff. I've got another rental farm that the tank's useless, and I need to rent a track hoe or a mini excavator and go out there and dig everything up. And it had a cutoff, but it broke on the other side of the cutoff. And if I'd had a main drain or a main cutoff at the pond, problem would have been solved. So those are things that I'm learning, and I wanted to share them with you to save you some time, save you some money in the future. But build a cutoff, and that way, even if something fails after the cows are not on here and you're not checking it every day, you're not going to drain your pond, you're not going to burn up a pump, or you're not going to spend a bunch of money on city water. And so I think that's essential. Hope this helps you guys.